It's now into November of 2025, and we have now arrived into quintessential Southern California. We're in Malibu, near Los Angeles, California, and we'll be spending the next week at the Malibu Beach RV Park. This campsite is located right alongside Highway 1, also known as the Pacific Coast Highway, which we've been following ever since we were in Mendocino in early October, and will continue to follow it until we reach San Diego in about a week. Our campsite gave us some excellent views over the Pacific Ocean, within which there are plenty of dolphins, and we did see quite a few of them. Now, I'm not entirely sure which species this is, but upon doing some research on the internet, I believe these are bottlenose dolphins, but if there's anyone who knows for sure, feel free to correct me in the comments if I got that wrong. These would be the only dolphins we would see on our entire trip, and although the views were very distant, I would say we came away with some pretty good footage despite that. There were also a couple of birds at our campsite as well, such as hummingbirds, quite a lot of them in fact, and these red-tailed hawks circling high above, who also gave us a perfect example of their iconic call, which is often mistaken for that of the bald eagle. I would say that this campsite in Malibu was definitely one of the better ones we visited during our travels. It was awesome, and the sunsets we saw here were absolutely perfect. Let's move on to the main reason why we are here in Malibu to begin with, its proximity to both the famous theme parks in the area. We're going to start with Disneyland, and we're going to be spending most of our time here at the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge section. I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan personally, so this was very cool to see. A lot of the rides here as well are very technologically advanced, certainly among the most that I've ever seen at a theme park. The Rise of the Resistance ride in particular was very, very cool. Then there are all the characters that would be walking around amongst the park guests that would interact with you and make your experience that much more enjoyable. Here's me with Din and Grogu, and here's Kylo Ren and his Stormtrooper guard. Something else really cool is all the different props and Easter eggs scattered throughout this section of the park, helping you feel that much more immersed in the Star Wars galaxy. Now let's go ahead and explore what else Disneyland California has to offer. One of the more fun rides that we did, which was surprising to me, was the go-karts race. Not because the go-karts are particularly fast or the ride is exhilarating, but because the steering is absolutely awful on the go-karts, which makes for some really funny mishaps. I'm not exactly sure whether that's a good or bad thing, but it makes for a lot of fun, so isn't that the goal? Another one of my favorite attractions to do here was the Disneyland Express, which is a narrow gauge railway which operates real steam locomotives. Here's one of them. As a rail fan, I honestly forgot that this existed, but it is super cool. But not only are the trains themselves cool, but the train ride is actually also a lot of fun. So of course we decided to indulge. During the ride, the train will enter a long, dark tunnel, which then gives way into the Grand Canyon. Or at least a simulation of the Grand Canyon. This was a really cool taste tester for what's to come later in this trip when we visit the real Grand Canyon. Stay tuned for that. After witnessing the Grand Canyon, the train travels back in time to the land of the dinosaurs, as depicted in the 1950s. This is super cool. It may not be in the slightest bit accurate to what we know paleontology to be today, but this was still super cool. It was like 1930s paleo art come to life. I loved it. It also reminded me quite a bit of Fantasia, especially this bit where the T-Rex faces off against a Stegosaurus. And it makes sense because Fantasia was Disney. Some of the man-made scenery we came across during our ride as well was very nice, particularly this bit with the waterfall as we went over the bridge. Very well done. Back to the main park now. Here's a quick look at the famous Haunted Mansion. Although we didn't go on the actual ride itself, this is still a really cool set piece. And here's one last look at one of the narrow gauge steam locomotives as we exit the park at the end of the day. That's just about everything I can show from our trip to Disney without getting the wax, so let's go back to our campsite and look at some more dolphins before heading off to Universal the next day. Time now for Universal Studios Hollywood. We'll be starting out in Super Nintendo World, which I would definitely say is probably the most immersive land in the entire theme park. It truly does feel like you're right in the middle of the Mushroom Kingdom. There's so many things to see and do, there's character meet and greets, it's all really cool. Something else really cool is the power-up band system that they have here in Super Nintendo Land. If you purchase one of these special wristbands, you'll be given access to certain mini-games scattered all throughout the land that are super fun and immersive. Unfortunately, there's only really one ride to speak of per se in Super Nintendo Land, which I think is this land's biggest shortcoming. But luckily, that one ride is very, very fun. It's the Super Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge ride, and it's awesome. Let's move on now to the part of the park that I was most excited to visit, which is the Jurassic Park land. Now, unfortunately, it is quite small, and there's not nearly as much to do as there is in, say, Orlando, but it's still really cool. And I will say that it is in much better shape than the one in Orlando. Next, we'll take a look at what is probably the most famous attraction in Universal Studios Hollywood, which is the Studio Tour. Overall, this is a really cool attraction. You get to have a sneak peek at some actual sound stages, some of which may or may not be in use during your visit, and at several points during the ride, the immersion is ramped up to 11, and you get to feel like you're actually genuinely being a part of certain famous movie scenes. And here's a look at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter area, where you get to see a life-size model of the Hogwarts Express. Overall, I really enjoyed my time at both Universal and Disneyland. These were some very fun theme parks to visit, and I'm definitely going to have to go back to the Universal Studios in Orlando to check out what they've done with the Epic Universe theme park that they've opened. The following day, we took a drive out to Los Angeles, specifically to the Hollywood sign. This famous sign was rumored to have been burnt down during the horrible fires that broke out back in January of 2025, but luckily those rumors were false and this famous landmark is just fine. We also got some pretty cool looks at this observatory nearby, which is really cool. Overall, LA is a really cool city, although as Canadians, our timing was not the greatest. We visited after the 2025 Baseball World Series, and if you're a fellow Canadian like me, you know what I'm talking about. Hopefully we can have better luck next year. That's going to do it for yet another video on this channel. Apologies for this one being a little late. That happens quite a lot. I'm hoping that I will be able to crack down and get the next few videos out in quick succession, but we'll just have to wait and see. I hope you enjoyed this one, and stay tuned as the next couple of videos, again, are going to be very exciting.